Okay, so for those people who haven't been to one of these sessions before, it is called Ask Me Anything. And the reason it's called Ask Me Anything is because you can ask me anything about your job search today. And no doubt, if you are thinking of a question, there'll be other people in the room who also have a similar question. So don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A section. And what I will do is I will go through and I will answer questions as they come up. Now, I've allowed an hour for this session today, but the last one went for almost an hour and a half. Sometimes it might only go for 40 minutes. So, I won't stop until you stop asking me questions. I would hope that, if you've come along today, you're probably aware I wrote a book called Uncover the Hidden Job Market. And certainly, if anybody has not got a copy of that book, you can, through our website, you can access a free downloadable copy. Or if you want to email info@arateexecutive.com.au, we can send you a PDF version of that book. Of course, if you want a physical copy, you can jump on Amazon or any of those booksellers and buy a physical copy of the book. But the PDF version is completely free. And as I say, you can get that through our website or by emailing us. It's not mandatory that you have to have read the book before the session today, but certainly it might be that when people ask questions, I'll say, this is something I talk about in a lot more detail in the book. So I'll give you a bit of an overview and then suggest that you go and read more in-depth information in the book. And also for those people who are here, I presume you know who I am, but just to be really upfront about it, for those who may not know me that well. So Richard Triggs, I'm the founder and CEO of Arete Executive. We're an executive headhunting business. We've been around for 16 and a half years and, very much in that sort of pimply-faced teenager phase, about to finish high school, probably on our learner's driver's license finally. And business is good. We've just employed a couple of new people into the team. So I think the team is now at 10, and we are what you would call a headhunter. So we're engaged by organisations to headhunt leadership roles for them, $150,000 base salary and above. So that could be mid-level technical leadership roles, operations manager, sales manager, HR manager, etc., right through to C-suite, CEO and board roles. And we work all over Australia. In fact, we even do some international recruiting. Not a big part of our business, but certainly operating all across Australia, across pretty much all industries. We don't really do any work in government, but it's not to say that we wouldn't. It's just that we haven't put much attention on that. And so all locations in Australia, all role families, and pretty much all industries. And so if you've had some involvement with us before as a candidate or a client, then certainly I hope you had a good experience. And we'd love to see what else we can do to assist you in that finding a new job time of life that it seems that you're probably in, given that you are attending the webinar today. All right, so what I'll ask you to do, please, is to type your questions into Q&A. And as I say, I will go through and I will answer those for you. And even if it's just you're looking more for a general comment or whatever it is, as I say, don't hesitate to put that in there. I'll make sure I address it. All right, question number 1 from anonymous attendee. Executive CV structure, key do's and don'ts. I note that many CVs I see these days have icons that seem very glossy to the style that I used to submit. What is expectation in executive CVs? Okay, great question. And certainly, again, I'll refer you to my book where I talk a fair bit about this. But we have seen over time, people get quite creative with their CVs. And to be completely honest with you, I don't like it. I don't like it. It makes a CV hard to read, hard to quickly disseminate the information. And so unless you're applying for, a graphic design, website design type role where, the way that you lay out documents or the way that you bring your artistic creativity into your work is important, I wouldn't do that. So let's talk a bit about CVs. So my belief is that the CV just needs to be good enough to get you to the meeting, whether that's an interview or an introductory meeting, whatever it might be. It doesn't need to be 10 out of 10. Okay, it doesn't need to be this magnificent work of art where you've labored over every word and made sure that it looks beautiful and so on. It just needs to be good enough. It just needs to be an 8 out of 10. And so if we start, one of the questions that I'm often asked is, how long should a CV be? And, there seems to be a lot of different talk about what's too long and what's too short and so on. I know that, for example, in the UK, there seems to be an emphasis on a 2-page CV. That's not really the case here in Australia. And so I would say to you, your CV needs to be long enough to sell you. And the reality is it's pretty hard to sell you in a document that's only 2 pages long. So for me, the CV, whether it's 4 pages, 6 pages, 8 pages, totally fine. If you're submitting a 28-page CV, probably a bit of an overkill. And sometimes you see that with academics that might put every single article at their site, every citation and so on. You don't need that. So I think, 4 to 8 pages is a good rule of thumb. And you need to understand that if a recruiter is recruiting a role, for example, I might be recruiting a CEO vacancy, and we put an ad up on Seek, and potentially we might get 200 plus applications. Interestingly, probably 180 of those people have got no relevant experience, and I have no idea why they're applying. But suffice to say, it's not uncommon for senior executive roles to get a huge volume. And so I talk about in my book, and I'll say here today, your CV will most likely get a 15-second initial review. And people go, gee, that seems really short, but I can guarantee you that that is the case. So when I look at a CV, I want to see the information as quickly as possible that would demonstrate that you are worthy of further consideration. Obviously, if I'm considering you further, then I will look, spend more time looking at your CV. But first cut, I reckon about 15 seconds. So what do I like to see on the first page? Obviously, first thing I want to see is your name, your email address, your mobile phone number, a link to your LinkedIn profile. Chris, just thanks for your comment. Just make sure you put stuff in Q&A rather than chat. But I appreciate you being here. So, okay, so yes, you'd be amazed how many people submit a CV and they don't put their contact details on their CV. And I think, far out, you're an executive, this seems pretty sort of basic 101. And then they might say, oh, but I put them in my covering letter, okay? Never, ever assume anybody will ever read your covering letter. In fact, I can honestly say that in, over 20 years of recruitment, it's extremely rare that I ever read somebody's covering letter. So if you've got detail in your covering letter that's not in your CV, then not a good thing. All right, so CV, name, email address, phone number, link to your LinkedIn profile, and location. Now, you don't need to put your whole residential address there because from a privacy point of view, you may not want to put that, on your CV, but definitely say, in Brisbane or Melbourne. If you're in Melbourne, but you're open to relocating, say location Melbourne, open brackets, open to relocating. Recruiters are lazy and stupid, right? If we have to go searching for that information, then it may result in you getting a thanks, but no thanks, and you definitely don't want that. Again, front page, qualifications and formal qualifications particularly, and then what I call a career summary table. So just a table which shows, okay, Richard Triggs, 2009 to current, founder and CEO of Arete Executive. And then the next line is the role before that, and then the next line is the role before that. Just a little summary. so that the recruiter can look at that and very quickly and easily see your career progression. And then when you go into your actual roles, so the first thing to do, founder and CEO of Arete Executive, or whatever yours is, have a brief 1 or 2 line explanation of the company. Don't assume that the person reading your CV knows the company. So it might be, I work for ABC Proprietary Limited, a global manufacturing company with operations in 27 countries that employs 47,000 people and has an annual turnover of, $1.7 billion. And a link to their website. So that's all you need, just that little bit of information to demonstrate who the company is. And then you go into your role, responsibilities, 4 or 5 bullet points, and your key achievements, 4 or 5 bullet points. I talk about the fact that your CV has to sell the sizzle. That's a sales expression. It's got to get me excited that I definitely want to contact you about this opportunity. And so a lot of people, they might put in their responsibilities, but they don't put in their achievements. So managed a team of 27 is not an achievement. It's a responsibility. What did you achieve? Try and make those achievements as quantifiable as possible. I grew revenue by X. I reduced expenses by Y. We grew market share by Z. I reduced lost time injuries by whatever. I launched a new product into a new market and achieved $12 million worth of new business within 12 months. My team successfully won national awards or whatever it might be. So, make those achievements quantifiable. You don't need 20 per role, 4 or 5 of them for your most recent roles. So perhaps going back around 10 years, or perhaps your most recent 3 roles. Okay, earlier than that, you can have less information, but certainly those more recent roles, I want to know, why are you awesome? Why do I definitely want to interview you for the vacancy I'm recruiting? Okay, so that's a brief overview of CVs. Like I say, if you look at my book, I talk about it in more detail. I also have a webinar specifically on how to write your CV and your LinkedIn profile. And if you contact us, we can happily send that to you. All right. Next question from Raina. Is it worth bolding keywords in the CV? I don't have an opinion on that. If it looks okay and you think it will help to get attention for those particular attributes, why not? Okay. One of the questions I get asked is, but what about CVs, being passed by AI? Passed, PARSED. AI is going through a CV looking for specific keywords, and if the keywords aren't there, you're going to get rejected, right? Now, again, I've worked in recruiting for over 20 years. I've never used AI to go through CVs and do that. None of my team have ever done that. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, but it's probably more applicable if you're applying for more junior technical roles. So, for example, if you're applying for an IT role, it might be going through and picking out, particular programs or coding tools or things, like that. But certainly at the executive leadership level, I would assume most of my peers in industry are the same, and certainly we are. Every CV gets human eyeballs, but they might only get human eyeballs for 10 or 15 seconds. So if an ad is calling for particular attributes or key achievements, make sure they are in your CV. Make sure they are easy for the recruiter to identify. Don't leave it to chance. And if that means, Raina, that you want to bold it, then, it can't hurt as long as it looks good and professional. Okay, all right. Next question, anonymous attendee. How best to reach out to network via LinkedIn and seek new job opportunities? All right, so there's this is really the crux of what I talk about. accessing the hidden job market. And again, if you read my book, I talk about this extensively. I would say at least 80% of jobs never get advertised. They never get to a recruiter. They are never in the open job market. They're filled in the hidden job market. So what do I mean by that? I mean that employers find somebody who can take away their pain and solve their problems, and they hire them. Often they hire them even without there being a job there to hire them for in the first place. So, people go, oh, where do you come with that 80% figure from? If you do some research, there's a lot of supporting evidence to that. But if you think about it, a CEO, their CFO resigns. They think, who do I know that might be good for that role? And then once they've exhausted that, they go, who might my board know that would be good for that role? Who might my leadership team know that might be good for that role? Who might my suppliers know or my customers know that might be good for that role? Who might my team within the business know? Who might my recruiters know? And, by that stage, you just assume that the vast number of jobs are already filled. So they only go to a recruiter as a matter of last recourse. Unless it's a particular situation where they have to demonstrate transparency of process for their shareholders or whatever it might be, often the case in, for example, not-for-profit membership associations. But in the vast majority of cases, if you are only looking at jobs jobs advertised on Seek, or LinkedIn, or you're only talking to recruiters, you're only seeing a very small number of the actual roles. So how do you access these hidden job market opportunities? You have to get in front of your employers of choice before they know that they need you. So, which really, coming back to this person's question, anonymous attendee. So, in terms of reaching out generally to your LinkedIn community, one of the things you can do, and I give an example of somebody in my book, that was looking for a full-time gig. They had a few hundred LinkedIn connections at the time. This is a few years ago. And so what they did is they in-mailed all of their connections. And in the email, it said, hi, I'm currently looking for a new opportunity to work full-time. However, in the meantime, if anybody is interested, I'm available to do some interim or part-time work. These are the kind of things that I can do. If I could be of any use to you, or perhaps there are opportunities in your business, then, I'd love to hear from you. And they did that, and they sent out, a few hundred emails, and that resulted in, some engagements, and they found a new full-time job relatively quickly. So that's what I call a fairly kind of broad brush, generic promotion. Hey, I'm looking for a new gig. Do you need me? Right? What my book is predominantly about, though, is reaching out directly to your employers of choice. So what you need to do firstly is think about which are the organizations that I would like to work for. Within those organizations, who is the key decision maker that my role would most likely report through to? And I would strongly recommend to you to not reach out to HR unless you're an HR professional in the first instance. And that's not because there's anything wrong with HR. HR have a tactical orientation. They are focused on what current vacancies do we have. Does this person suit a current vacancy? No, they don't. Thanks very much, but we don't have anything suitable. Whereas the line manager, the key decision maker, has a strategic orientation. They're thinking about their business. They're thinking about their human capital requirements. They're thinking about new projects, new initiatives that they need to build teams for. They're thinking about Fred, who's underperforming and needs to be replaced, or Mary, who's retiring or going on maternity leave, or they're much more aware of all of the moving parts in their team, often a lot more aware than perhaps HR are. So by reaching out to them, you're much more likely to get engagement. So obviously, if you are looking for a CEO vacancy, you would be reaching out to the managing director or the chair. If you're looking for a executive leadership team opportunity, you would be reaching out to the CEO. If you're an early careerist finance person and you want to work at Rio Tinto, you wouldn't reach out to the CEO because that person is too far removed from the role that you're looking for. So again, looking at the company website, looking at those people who are on the website in these leadership roles should give you a good idea of who to reach out to. If you can't find them there, if you get on LinkedIn and you search for employees of Rio Tinto based in Brisbane, for example, you'll see that you'll start to come up with those people. It's generally pretty easy, typically within the first 50 or so profiles, that you'll find the right person that you want to reach out to. So what you do then is you reach out to them and you send them a LinkedIn connection request. And by doing that through LinkedIn, once they accept your connection request, if assuming that they do, you'll generally get access to their email address. If they don't accept your LinkedIn connection request, though, it can be more challenging to find the right email for them. But there are great plugins. For example, one is called Email Hunter. Email Hunter is a free plugin for Chrome. And so you can go to a company website, you can use the Email Hunter plugin, and it will show you what the email protocol is. So for example, Arete Executive, it is first name, first initial. So Richard T, Louise D, Yolana B. So if you're wanting to get in touch with Peter Guizdala, then you go, okay, well, it's probably Peter G. So that's a good tool for finding people's email addresses. Of course, if that doesn't work, then you can always ring switch and say, I want to send an email to Bill Blogs. What's his email address, please? So my suggestion is you identify your employer of choice. You identify the key decision maker. You send them a LinkedIn connection request and you send them an email. And when you send that email, you are asking them for a meeting. You don't say to them, have you got a job? Because the likely response is either yes, I do, or no, I don't. Or alternatively, they may push you to HR. And again, at this point, you don't want to be talking to HR. So the email structure that I suggest, and you can obviously put your own flavor to it. Let's assume we're reaching out to Mary and we say, look, Mary, I'm hoping you can help me, please. I'm currently looking at my next career move, and I'd really appreciate it if I could have 15 minutes of your time on Zoom or Teams to introduce myself and get your advice about the market and where the right opportunities might be for me. So instead of saying, do you have a job? You're saying, can you help me, please? People love to help people. I'd love to get your advice. People love to offer advice. And I'm only looking for 15 minutes. So in the first edition of my book, I said, ask them for a coffee. People rarely do coffees anymore. I used to have 10 to 12 coffee meetings a week. Now I have 10 to 12 Zoom and team meetings a day. So a 15-minute request is not a huge impost versus, asking somebody to take potentially up to 2 hours out of their day to come and meet with you. So that's how I suggest that you do it. And that you understand that this is a volume game. You're not going to reach out to 5 people and get 5 meetings and have a new job, every time. I mean, it definitely does happen. And I've seen many, many people who have followed the advice and the methodology that I talk about in my book achieve new jobs very quickly. But more often than not, it takes a bit of time. So what I suggest to people is that you block an hour in your diary per day. And in that 1 hour per day, you identify 3 employers of choice. They're 3 key decision makers. You send 3 LinkedIn connection requests and you ask for 3 meetings. And if you do that every day, Monday to Friday, so 3 a day, 5 days a week, 15 a week, that should secure you 2 to 3 meetings per week. And my experience of having talked about this methodology now for such a long time is that people who do that consistently and proactively typically have found a new job within 12 weeks, often far more quickly than that, right? Now, when you're reaching out to Mary, Mary is not an idiot. She knows that part of your motivation is you potentially want a job in her organization. Mary is going to look at your LinkedIn profile, and you need to make sure that just like your CV is really selling your key achievements and transferable skills, your LinkedIn profile is doing that as well. Mary wants to talk to you. Mary has a mandate to bring excellent people into the business. Mary can't hire you if she doesn't know who you are. Why would Mary want to go through a hugely protracted and expensive recruitment process and use an external recruiter and spend potentially tens of thousands of dollars if she can get you for free? So a lot of people have this huge reluctance. Oh, I can't reach out to Mary. No doubt she's really busy, and why would she want to meet with me, and so on and so forth. They want to meet you. Not everybody wants to meet you. It is a numbers game, right? But they want to meet you. And if you are an excellent candidate and you are relevant for their business, again, if you're the graduate finance person, the CEO of Rio Tinto, pretty unlikely that they'll want to meet you, right? But, somebody at a more line management level probably does, right? Similarly, if you have worked in the mining industry and you reach out to the chair of the Commonwealth Bank because you want to be the CEO of the Commonwealth Bank and you've got no relevant experience, they probably won't want to meet with you. But if you are a banking professional at ELT level and you reach out to the CEO of Commonwealth Bank, they probably will want to meet with you. If nothing else, they're meeting a great person from their industry. They've got the opportunity to potentially pick up some gossip about what's happening around town, and they want to meet with you. And you want to meet with them because that's how you access these hidden job market opportunities. Also, those people, as the old saying goes, birds of a feather flock together, they socialize with other people like them, whether it's playing golf or riding their bike or, being a member of the Brisbane Club or the RACV Club or what have you. They're hanging out with people that you want to be referred to. So the more you can do this consistently, proactively, every day, the faster you'll get a new opportunity. Now, I'm not saying don't talk to recruiters and don't apply for jobs. You read. You try and answer the role specifics in tabular format. Okay, so firstly, cover letters. I don't read them. Now, if you're applying for a job directly with an employer and they're not recruiting, 10 jobs at once, they've got more capacity and probably more interested, they may well read your covering letter. So if you're applying for a job directly with the employer, you might want to write a covering letter. And of course, if the ad asks you to write a covering letter, then you definitely would. But normally, if you're applying for a role with a recruiter, I don't, suggest that you do. I mean, it can't hurt to. It's not going to work against you, but I want you to make sure that any information that's relevant for the vacancy, you're not leaving it up to the person to read the covering letter. You're putting that information in your CV. Now, answer the role specifics in a tabular format. If the ad is calling for some specific attributes, then it makes sense to you on that front page to perhaps document those attributes. Let's say, for example, they say, okay, mandatory for consideration is you must have been a operations manager in a fabrication manufacturing company. So that might be a point that you put in there, and then you just put a line about your relevant experience. Or, must have developed supply chain relationships with manufacturers in China, whatever it is, right? So again, you can definitely do that. And if that helps a recruiter to quickly identify that you are a candidate of choice, then that's a very good thing to do. I don't think you need to have 27 different resumes to suit 7 different types of job. You should have one CV that you're really happy with, but then you would amend that CV each time you make an application to some degree. Hi, I've been tapping into my network. I read your book, it's very insightful, but I hesitate and not sure if I should be pretty forthright about the fact that I am looking, and that's the reason I reached out to them in the first place. Any guidance would help. Okay, so anonymous attendee, I'm not sure if I should be forthright. Now, I'm not exactly sure why that would be. I'll make an assumption you're currently working and you don't potentially want your current employer to know that you're looking for a new job. So if it's something other than that, then definitely put another comment in the Q&A. But if you are currently working and you are reaching out directly to competitors or you have other concerns about confidentiality, then what you could do instead is say, hi, Mary, I'm really hoping that we connect. We both work in the same industry. I'd love to introduce myself and get to learn a little bit more about you and about the organization that you work for. You're not then saying in that message, I am looking for a new job. Now, again, Mary's not an idiot. She probably understands why you're motivated to reach out to her, but you're not directly saying, I'm looking for a new job. But if you are looking directly for a new job, then why the reticence? I'm definitely a strong advocate of be upfront, be honest, be direct. You don't want to waste your time or their time. And the clearer you can be about your motivations, the better. By the same token, you don't want to say, I'm looking for a new job because my boss is an idiot and he's an alcoholic and embezzling all the money in the company, right? You don't want to air your dirty laundry either in that message or indeed even were you to be interviewed, but so obviously you need to be candid and make sure that you're stepping forward positively rather than negatively. But other than that, what's the saying? He who hesitates is lost, or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, just be upfront. I'd love to have a chat to you about the market and get your advice about where the right opportunities might be for me. There's nothing desperate about that. It's not that people are going to look at you and go, oh, who's this idiot who's, so desperate they're reaching out to me. Again, if they look at your profile and they can see that you're a relevant and excellent candidate, they'll be delighted that you reached out to them. They won't be upset or dismissive. They'll be, keenly looking forward to meeting with you because, of course, you can add great value to their business, make their job a lot easier, make them more money, whatever it might be. It's absolutely in their interest to meet with you. So I would not be hesitant. Who dares wins? Absolutely, who dares wins. But and it's amazing, Tim. You say that who dares wins. It's so many people. Excuse me one moment. So many people who have read read my book and listened to my presentations and come along to these. And then 3 or 4 months later, they reach out to me and they say, oh, Richard, I'm just wondering, have you got any jobs on at the moment that might be suitable for me? And I say to them, have you been reaching out to your employers of choice? And they say, no, I'm not doing it. And I basically, people are too lazy, too egotistical, or too scared of rejection. I mean, I say in my book, and I still think it's completely true, 98% of people who read my book don't do anything. I don't get why. I mean, if you're underemployed or you're in a job that you don't enjoy, why wouldn't you reach out to your employers of choice? What's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is they either don't reply or they say, thanks, but I don't want to meet with you. And that's okay too, because it's a numbers game, right? People say, oh, when I'm working for a company, I'm really good at promoting the company that I work for, but I'm not very good at promoting myself. And I say, well, time to put your big boy or your big girl pants on. If you want that job, you you want a great job. This is a big part of how you're going to get it. So what's the reservation? What's the hesitation? And again, once you start to do it and you build some confidence, this actually works. I'm getting engagement. I'm getting some meetings. It becomes fun. You're meeting some really interesting people. You're learning about other businesses. They're learning about you. Generally, these people are interesting and interested, and it's a really fun process. Some people are saying, "Oh, I did it, Richard, but I just didn't get any results." Well, how many people did you reach out to? Maybe 4 or 5. Okay, 4 or 5 is not enough. It's a numbers game. I tell people 3 a day, 15 a week. Now, if I didn't have a job and I was worried about paying my mortgage next month, I would be reaching out to 10 a day. I'd be reaching out, it's 3 a day. I'd be reaching out to 10 a day. Okay. Conversely, I've worked with people before and they'll say, "Look, I really like my job. I'm under no threat of losing my job. I've just been here for a while. It's probably time for a change. If I don't find a new job for 6 to 12 months, that's fine." Then for them, it might not be 3 a day, it might be 3 a week. Whatever the number is for you, right? But it's about being disciplined. It's about being consistent, and just holding yourself to account to do the activity. Once again, so many people. I was just talking to a lady yesterday who had read my book. She'd come along to one of my presentations. 18 months later, still hadn't found a job. We had a come to Jesus conversation, and she started to reach out to her employers of choice, immediately started to generate some good meetings, and very quickly found a new job. So I know from constant feedback, literally every week, people are contacting me and saying, "Oh, Richard, I applied what you said, but talked about in your book, and I got this fantastic new job. Thanks very much." I would get those messages pretty much weekly. So I know from hundreds and hundreds of examples that this works. But at the end of the day, I also know 98% of people won't take any action, which for the 2% who do, is even better for them, because you think, "Oh, what happens if Mary's getting 50 emails like this a week asking for a meeting?" I can pretty much guarantee you she's probably getting a message once in a blue moon. So don't let your reservations or hesitations stop you from taking action. As Tim says, "Who dares wins." You get Tim, you're a bit of a philosopher, Tim. I'm liking it. The opposite of fear isn't love, it's action. Taking action dispels fear. Well, sure. They often say the opposite of hate is love, but hate comes from fear. Fear is the underlying emotion behind hate. So I get what you're talking about, Tim. I actually, over the last few years, I've been training as a psychotherapist. Not that I want to work as a psychotherapist, but great skills to have in my work, and definitely understand, the difference between fear and love and hate and action and so on. Conversely, inaction grows fear. Well, that's true. You start to build these mental constructs, or that the more you sort of spend time dwelling on that, the more it perpetuates it and grows these mountains into a molehill. It's just take action, just small amounts of action on a daily basis to get you where you need to be. Okay, so there's no further questions at the moment. So let me just talk a little bit more generally for a few minutes, but please, throw some questions up if you want them answered, because if we don't get any more, then that's good. We'll all get an early mark. The market is strong. You turn on the news and you listen to all the doom and gloom and global wars and AI and Australia's recessions and blah, blah, and interest rates. And it's very easy to get this impression that there's not much hiring going on. But the reality is there's always hiring going on. In good times, companies want to hire people to capitalize on the good times. in bad times or challenging times, companies want to hire good people to see them through the challenges that they're facing. Good people always find good work. I don't know what the unemployment rate is at the moment, but let's say it's somewhere around 5% or wherever it seems to be pretty much all the time anyway, right? That pretty much means there's full employment. There's always going to be people coming in and out of employment. There's always opportunity. If I talk to 20 CEOs a week, I'm hosting a breakfast tomorrow morning. There's going to be about 12 CEOs there. Last week I ran a lunch, there were 12 CEOs there, and 19 times out of 20, they're very bullish. They're feeling very optimistic. They're excited about the future. They're not caught up in what we, hear the media, forcing this negativity, because negativity sells. Positivity, it doesn't seem to be something that they really want to dwell on. So the market is good, but 80% of jobs never get to a recruiter. I talk, not regularly, but I talk occasionally with my peers in industry, and there's a lot of recruiters are busy at the moment. But by the same token, there's a lot of work that's happening, jobs that are being recruited, which just are under the radar. That's why this hidden market process is so critically important to your job search. But by the same token, it is important for you to try and find 3, 4, 5 recruiters who work in your space that know you, that know what you're looking for, who know your strengths, that can be actively, considering and promoting you for opportunities. Yeah, there's no point in an IT programmer, saying, "Hey, Richard, can I meet with you?" Because I don't recruit in that space. In fact, I don't really recruit at all. I have a team of people who do that for me. But certainly, if you're an IT professional, you want to find recruiters that specialize in IT roles. How do you find them? You look at the people who are advertising the jobs that you're attracted to, and then you do something which very, very few people do. So, for example, if I'm recruiting a CEO role and I have 200 applicants and I narrow that down to 10 people for interview, that means 190 of those people are getting a thanks but no thanks email. We've all had those, right? Thanks for your application. Unfortunately, this is the instance, they're better qualified candidates. Good luck with your job search, etc. Right? Of those 190 people, how many people do you think will ring me and say, "Hey, Richard, unfortunately, I wasn't shortlisted for that role, but I'd love to have a chat to you because obviously, if you recruit that role, you're probably recruiting other roles that I might be attracted to. I'd love to do that." How many people do you think reach out? None. Very occasionally one, perhaps two, but most of the time, none. And I think to myself, that's absolutely crazy. That thanks but no thanks email is the perfect opportunity to actually get in front of a recruiter. You want recruiters to know you, know your strengths, know what you're looking for, because as will often be the case, we might be briefed on a role and I might think, "Oh, who do I know that might be good for this?" Andrew, right? I can't know that about you unless I have spent time with you. You need to find 4 or 5 recruiters that are actively working in your space, and you need to be on their radar and you need to be a squeaky wheel. Now, I'm sure I will get tons of comments, as I always do. "Oh, but recruiters never return my phone calls or reply to my emails." And that's true, right? It's amazing that an industry which is all about human beings treats candidates so poorly, treats candidates like a commodity. And if you're a great executive and somebody treats you that way, then just move on. It's their loss, right? You want to find people who have the availability and desire, and the commitment to supporting you in your job search, because number one, if they place you, they'll make a lot of money. And number two, if they place you, then you can potentially become a client, employer client for them in the future. So I'm constantly amazed at how few recruiters, they might pay lip service to it, but their actions don't demonstrate that. Why do I run a monthly networking drinks? Why do I run this monthly webinar? Why have I written books? Why do I do podcasts and so on and so forth? It's because I want to support you through your job search. Now, if I placed every single person I spoke to, I'd be a gazillionaire, but obviously that's not the case. But at least if I help you with some information that assists you in your job search, then you'll hopefully think kindly about me and about Arete Executive in the future when you come to hire. So by doing this, I'm really just investing in my future karma. Okay, it looks like we've had a couple more things added on. What do you think about the Brisbane market in contrast to Sydney and Melbourne? Where would you look, ASX versus private versus infrastructure, pros and cons? Well, anonymous attendee, that's one of those questions. Well, as in everything, it depends. What depends on the industry. It depends on what's happening. So, for example, if you're an FMCG manufacturing executive, there's a lot more opportunity in Sydney and Melbourne than there is in Brisbane because there's a lot more of that industry down there. So it's a bit hard to conclusively say Brisbane's great, Sydney's terrible, or what have you. I would say in the main that there are good opportunities everywhere. And also one of the things which, I've been in recruitment for 20 odd years, certainly back in the day, people in Brisbane would be paid less because they'd say, cost of living in Brisbane's less, so therefore we don't have to pay as much. Definitely now it's very much a case that if you want me to do the job, it doesn't matter if I'm in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne or Timbuktu, you need to pay me what the job's worth. So there's a lot more parity around income. And the other thing too is that obviously post-COVID in particular, there's a lot more opportunity to do telecommuting or, work from Brisbane where you might fly to Sydney for a few days, a fortnight or whatever, the schedule might be. There's a lot more people doing that now. In fact, I know people in Brisbane, one guy immediately springs to mind. He's a CEO of a listed American mining company, but he's based in Brisbane because he just works remotely for them from Brisbane. Those kind of things are much more common now than they used to be. Similarly, where would you look, ASX versus private versus infrastructure? Well, it depends on what you do, right? If you want to work for a tier one bank, then they're ASX listed companies or tier one mining companies and so on. But to have a categorical, where would you look, ASX versus private? Well, different horses, different courses. Do people move back and forwards between ASX and private? Yes, they do. Do people move back and forth between for-profit and not-for-profit? Yes, they do. So there are quite a lot of senior executives in the for-profit space who reach a point and they say, I'd actually like to give back and work in the not-for-profit space and make that transition and vice versa. So, particularly as we are now living and working a lot longer, we're having, a lot more variety in our career than perhaps our parents and grandparents did. Then it means that, you're not, I've only worked in ASX, so I can only work in ASX. Or I've only worked in infrastructure, I can only work in infrastructure. Your skill set is transferable. And so, what I would encourage you to do is be intelligently optimistic. In other words, again, if you're a mining professional, you don't apply to be the CEO of Commonwealth Bank. But if you're a mining professional, could you move into a mining services company or an oil and gas company or a clean energy company or a civil infrastructure company? There's definitely movement available into adjacent industry. Likewise, if you're a finance person, could you step into a sales role or an operations role or a board role or a consulting role? Yes, you can. So you're not wedded. I went to uni, I got an accounting degree, I started working in an ASX mining company. That's my lot for life. That's completely changed now. And of course, with the evolution incredibly quickly of AI, we could be sitting here in 2 or 3 years' time with a massively transformed landscape from an employment point of view. I think the change is going to happen a lot more quickly than most people predict. I think it's going to be a lot more dramatic than most people predict. I think it's easy to be fearful of that, but it's going to happen. So for myself, I'm just kind of just sitting back and enjoying the ride. Will in 3 years' time executive search still be a thing? Don't know. Who's to say? I mean, the improvement in AI capability is just so incredibly fast and so incredibly holistic that we might all be sitting on universal basic income and playing our ukuleles at the beach, in a couple of years' time. Who's to say? Okay. How amenable are companies on the East Coast to hybrid work? I think that I might have just answered that for you. Not every company is amenable to it. Okay, but there definitely are that are some. There are definitely some that are. Likewise, we saw pre-COVID, you had to work in the office 5 days a week. During and post-COVID, you could work from home pretty much full time. Now there seems to be a bigger swing towards bringing people back into the office, but not necessarily full time in the office. So again, different companies. My business, for example, I like everybody to come into the office at least once a week, but I know people are more productive at home, and I know people want that flexibility now. So I'm very comfortable with Arete Executive having that kind of arrangement. Just come in 1 day a week, meet some people in the team, build and invest in the culture and the relationships and so on. Other companies might say, look, this person has to be here 4, if not 5 days a week. So once again, part of your due diligence is when you're looking at opportunity is seeing what their flexibility is like in that regard. The same thing with, fly out from Brisbane, or even just telecommuting from Brisbane. Lots and lots of people are doing that now, but not every company will want to accommodate that. So you just need to, suck it and see. Okay, lots of anonymous attendees. I don't know if it's the same anonymous attendee. If they are, then thank you for asking so many good questions, or if it's different ones, well, there you go. Okay, anonymous attendee. I separated from my previous employer at a C-level role after nearly 8 months. Came as a shock and has left me scared or scarred and undermined my confidence. Have you seen this happen in your experience, and how should I cope? Happens all the time, right? Redundancy 20 years ago was, an unusual event, and that's why they had outplacement psychologists that would give people big cuddles and say, there, you're still a good person. Nowadays, people accept that at some point in their career, they'll probably be made redundant at least once. In fact, somebody was telling me the other day they've been made redundant 5 times in their career. So, so I think it's just the reality. I think also, if it's been a unfortunate departure, which it sounds like in this case it has been, it can be really hard. My last serious role before I started my business was working for a company for over 5 years, and it ended dramatically badly. And at the time, I was devastated. But if it hadn't have happened, I would have never started Arete and wouldn't have the fantastic, enjoyable profession and team and relationships that I have now. So I think that you just have to lick your wounds and get on with it. I think that most employers, if you have on your CV an 8-month tenure, you might want to just put a little line in there, reason for leaving. You don't want people to make assumptions that you might be a flight risk. One person has an 8-month employment thing in their CV, not that big a deal. If the last 5 jobs in a row have been like that, then employers could quite understandably be a bit risk adverse. So if that is the case for you or for other people listening, then just be upfront about it. And again, if you have the opportunity to talk to these people, you can be honest without being incredibly forthright. So, I was employed. After 8 months, it became evident that the role was not as I originally understood it to be. And as a result, I decided it was best to depart. Is a much more positive way than saying, the boss was an asshole and treated their team like crap and we're trading insolvently, right? So again, anybody who's interviewing you, if you are too negative, then it possibly could make them think, I wonder whether this is a negative employee. So I really encourage you to try and put as positive a spin on it as possible while still being honest about the situation. Okay. Another anonymous attendee. When you think about redundancy and egos, salaries, and positions, what is your advice to candidates about managing expectations? When you think about redundancy and egos, salaries, and positions. Okay, so again, I'm going to make a bit of an assumption. You're saying, if I was in a job and I was I was a C-suite executive and I was being paid a ton of money, and then I get made redundant, how do I sort of manage my expectations? Do I only want to earn the same amount of money or have the same level of role? Well, of course, ideally, that's what you want, right? And, but, you might decide that you're prepared to be more flexible to secure a new opportunity, in which case you might be prepared to, consider a less senior role or a lower salary. Again, it very much depends on the circumstance and, different horses, different courses. The one thing I'll say though, and I talk about a particular person in my book, they were made redundant. They were a CEO of a business that merged, and as a result, their role got made redundant. And so when I met them after that redundancy, they said to me, "Oh, Richard, I want to be a CEO. I want to stay in Brisbane, and I want to earn a minimum of $400,000. And then 3 or 4 months later, they contacted me, "Oh, Richard, I was wondering if you've got any jobs." And they said to me, "Look, I've now decided, whilst I wanted 400, I'm open from 250. Whilst I wanted to stay in Brisbane, I'm open to relocating. And whilst I wanted a CEO gig, I'm now open to a more junior role." Right? So they're compromising a lot on all 3 factors. And I said to them, "How are you going in terms of reaching out to your employers of choice?" And they went, "I'm not doing it." And I said, "Why aren't you doing it?" And this person, who at the time was probably mid to late 50s, said to me, "Look, Richard, I'm at the point in my career that I think that they should be reaching out to me. I shouldn't have to reach out to them." And I said to this person, "So how's that working out for you?" Right? This person was prepared to compromise on role, remuneration, and location. But if they'd started reaching out directly to their employers of choice, they could have easily secured, a job in Brisbane at the money that they wanted, potentially months prior to that. But for whatever reason, their ego was such that they weren't prepared to take action. And I think that's really sad. I think that person has done themselves a great disservice. But it's their life and it's their loss. And so, yeah, I think ego can be, a big thing to overcome. But by the same token, if you want to be a C-suite executive and you take a more junior role, and then 3 months' time, you're getting out of bed every day and driving to a job that you hate, where you're not being paid very well, and you're, in a more junior position, why would you do that? Why not instead get out and proactively create the opportunities that you want, through accessing the hidden job market? Okay, well, we're right on 6, so we've just passed 6. It appears that we've run out of questions. So I hope everybody's thoroughly enjoyed this presentation. As I say, if you want a free copy of my book, don't hesitate to reach out to that. I have a team of people, and if you look at the team and you see the people advertising roles that you're attracted to, feel free to reach out to them. There's not much point in reaching out to me because I simply don't have time to do one-on-one meetings. That's why I run these sort of one-to-many events. We do a great networking drinks event once a month for senior executives in Brisbane. I'm running a breakfast group tomorrow for CEOs. I run a lunch every month at Brisbane Long Lunch Club. So if you want to catch up with me and meet some awesome people, I definitely recommend that you come along. That's in Brisbane. I do them sporadically in Sydney and Melbourne, but I have nothing at this point, locked in for the rest of this year. It's not to say that that might not change. But look, I wish you all the very best with your job search. Thanks for your attention and have a fantastic night. See you later.